We are all going to die here. These were the last words scribbled by a doomed soldier at Little Bighorn, words the U.S. Army tried to bury. But today, his lost letter breaks 150 years of silence. Why did Custer's men know they were marching to their deaths? And what did Reno whisper about their commander's final moments? The truth lies in these unread letters and in the whispers of the last survivors who escaped the killing ground. We are all going to die here. That soldier was right, but his letter survived, and with it, the real story of Custer's last stand. They knew, long before the first bullet flew, they knew these were not the words of some panicked recruit, but of hardened cavalrymen who'd survived the Civil War. Yet on June 25, 1876, they even scrawled final goodbyes in the dust. Why? Because Custer ignored 3 fatal warnings, and what happened next wasn't just a defeat. It was a slaughter the Army still doesn't want you to understand. When Crow scouts begged Custer to wait for reinforcements, too many Sioux, more than stars in the sky. He called them cowards. But John Berkman, Custer's own orderly, would later confess. The general's hands were shaking when he read that report. Just hours before the attack, Scout Bloody Knife threw his rifle down in disgust. You go down there, you will not come back. Custer laughed, but Private Hardened watched that same scout's head explode moments later. When Reno's men retreated across the river, they heard Custer's battalion being torn apart. Yet Major Reno, drunk in his tent that night, mocked his dead commander as the American Marat. The Army would later burn survivor testimonies, calling this a betrayal. Did Custer's own officers let him die? Because when the smoke cleared, Reno's whiskey flask was empty. Benteen's reinforcements arrived hours late, and every last man in Custer's company was. This is a massacre because not one body was left intact. The letters don't lie. The last words of Custer's men weren't for glory. They were God help us. And the real story? It's been buried with them until now. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If this story has moved you, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow I'll be sharing something truly extraordinary that you won't want to miss. On June 25, 1876, near the winding waters of the Little Bighorn River in what is now Montana, General George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry engaged in a battle that would seal their fate and etch their names into the annals of American history. This clash was no simple encounter. It was a brutal collision between the U.S. military and a vast alliance of Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors fighting to defend their people and way of life. Eyewitnesses to the bloodshed described an atmosphere gripped by confusion, terror, and raw survival. Men like George Hardened and John Berkman, soldiers who were not just fighting for their lives, but bearing witness to a calamity unfolding around them, described scenes that defied reason. The sheer scale of the native force they faced was overwhelming. It was clear they had underestimated their enemy. These personal testimonies cut through the fog of folklore and patriotic retellings. They confront us with the stark reality of the battle, its unrelenting violence, its suffering, and the slow descent into hopelessness that many of the soldiers endured. Despite being given a river that promised relief, thirst and starvation gnawed at their resolve. Many could hardly stand, let alone fight, worn down by days of grueling marches and sleepless nights. The sounds of battle, rifle fire, war cries, and the screams of the wounded echoed across the valleys and ravines. The mournful songs of the tribes rang out over the hills, blending grief with victory. These haunting harmonies served as a backdrop to the terror of those trapped in what they realized might be their final hours. In those terrifying moments, men were forced to summon unimaginable courage, while others were consumed by fear and doubt. It wasn't just a battle, it was a reckoning. A storm of violence was followed by a hollow silence, a void filled only by the moans of the dying and the whispering winds through the grass. The disaster that unfolded at Little Bighorn was not born of a single mistake, but a series of poor decisions and failed communication. The story of how so many lives were lost comes alive to the raw, emotional recollections of those who escaped the jaws of death. Kindly like and subscribe to our channel as we continue to explore these haunting memories and set the record straight on history. We left our position at the Rosebud at noon on June 22nd. The sun beat down as we marched about 12 miles upstream, the men dragging their feet and the horses kicking up dust in the dry heat. That night, we camp along the trail, surrounded by uncertainty. By the next morning, June 23rd, we resumed our march before dawn, following a trail that wound through the rolling hills. As we pushed forward, the tension among the ranks was growing. Later that evening, 6 Crow scouts, Custer's trusted advance eyes, returned from their mission with urgent news. They had found fresh pony tracks leading toward what they believed was an Indian village nearby. Custer summoned his officers. I couldn't hear what was said, but it was clear the tone had shifted. The scouts were again dispatched ahead. At around 4 p.m., we reached the remnants of an abandoned village. We made camp about 2 miles below the forks of the Rosebud. That night, under the dim light of the moon, the scouts rode out once more. By 11 p.m., the silence was broken with Custer's command to break camp and move again, this time marching up the right fork of the Rosebud. At daybreak, the scouts returned with urgency in their eyes. They claimed a large village sat just a few miles away. We took cover in a nearby ravine while Custer and his aides scouted the horizon. He returned, saying he saw nothing. But the scouts, along with mixed-blood guide named Nook Boer, insisted, almost pleaded, that the village was just ahead, hidden from view. Suddenly, things shifted. The scouts reported that Sioux war parties had already spotted us and were following our movements. Custer responded swiftly. He ordered the men to prepare for battle. We advanced cautiously alongside a creek, moving nearly 6 kilometers. Then, near the mouth of the Little Bighorn Valley, we encountered a lone lodge. Inside, a dead warrior lay, evidence that the village was indeed nearby and likely retreating or preparing for battle. Custer sent word to Colonel Reno, telling him to push forward with the scouts. Reno led his detachment across the open plains and forded the river at a natural crossing. After moving about a mile in, they dismounted and took up a defensive position in a wooded area. But then the native warriors came, fast and determined, charging across the open ground on horseback. Reno's men opened fire, but the odds quickly turned. The warriors flanked them, tried to trap them between the woods and the river. Reno shouted for his men to fall back into the trees, hoping for better cover. But there was no escape. The Sioux pushed in with a furious assault. Bullets tore through the air. Men and horses collapsed in heaps. Chaos reigned. Those who could ran in every direction seeking shelter. I managed to gather 13 soldiers, some of them wounded, and led them deeper into the trees. Some of the injured begged to run, thinking flight offered a better chance. But I held firm. Stay and fight, I told them. We still have hope. We stayed hidden for what felt like an eternity, the gunfire around us never ceasing. We had no idea that Custer's own command was already locked in its death struggle just over the ridge. Eventually, the noise started to die down. I urged the men to move. Some obeyed. Others refused, too weak or afraid to go on. We crossed the river in small groups and joined Reno's forces on the bluffs. Then came the flood, native warriors, fresh from Custer's annihilation, now turning their attention to us. As night fell, we scrambled to fortify our position, using whatever we had, dead horses, saddles, even packs of hardtack, as barricades. Before dawn, they came again. The assault was more aggressive. Rocks rained down from the ridges. Warriors charged in waves. Captain Benteen rallied his men and launched a desperate counterattack. It stunned the enemy. His stand likely saved the entire group. But by mid-morning, the men were beyond exhaustion. Many had not had water for nearly 36 hours. Their tongues swelled in their mouths. Some tried to eat hardtack and crackers, but without saliva, they crumbled like dust. Others chewed grass, but it stuck to their lips, robbing them of speech. Volunteers, some barely able to stand, offered to run to the river. The wounded wouldn't survive without water. The river lay 700 yards away, down a slope and across open ground under constant fire. About 50 men made the run. Native sharpshooters hidden in the trees across the water kept the edge of the river deadly. Still, some reached it. They filled canteens and kettles and crouched behind rocks, waiting for a chance to dash back. One was killed outright, others wounded. But water finally made it to the wounded. One man had his leg shattered and later lost it to amputation. Around 2 p.m., the native forces began to withdraw. Sporadic gunfire continued into the evening. Only at dusk did the battlefield begin to quiet. The animals, half dead from thirst, were finally allowed to graze and drink. Reno ordered a move to higher ground. We braced for more fighting, but by morning, the warriors had vanished. At 10 a.m., word came General Terry was 6 miles away. Soon after, his column appeared on the horizon. Mr. Henn, who had fought from Reno's left flank with the scouts, described what he saw: a mixed force, 35 native allies, 6 friendly Sioux, 6 Crow scouts, several white men. He saw a scout fall, knife in hand. 2 cavalrymen he had left in the woods were missing, likely dead. He saw a soldier ride for Ford, only be shot before making it. Lieutenant McIntosh was among the first to die. His horse was killed early. Hodson tried to swim the river, but was shot by a sharpshooter just as he reached the far bank. The Indians never took Custer's pack mules, but over 100 cavalry horses were gone, either captured or killed. Some feared men were captured and tortured. Isaiah Dorman, the black interpreter, had wounds that suggested torture before death. Another body was grotesquely mutilated. Around us, older native men and women wept openly. The mourning had begun. Still, I couldn't shake the dread in my heart. On the 25th and 26th, a sniper from the hills picked us off. He was deadly accurate. Soldiers, horses, and mules fell one by one. Captain Ryan eventually used a long-range rifle to kill him. I later found the sniper's body behind a wall of rocks, his buffalo gun still in hand. Smoke lifted slowly. Warriors retreated to mourn. They left a few behind to keep us pinned. We had eaten nothing since morning. Raw bacon tasted like straw. Hardtack crumbled like sawdust. Many collapsed from exhaustion. I was assigned to stand outside Reno's tent. Inside, I heard him drinking heavily. At one point, he joked, "I wonder where the Murat of the American Army is now," and laughed bitterly. I didn't know who Murat was, but I was angry, offended. I walked past sleeping men. Others lay still, never to rise. The night was heavy with silence. Only the sorrowful chants of native women and the beat of distant drums echoed across the valley. I kept my eyes on the ridgeline. The last place we saw Custer was. And in my heart, I kept hoping, even then, that he might still return. We are all going to die here. These words, scribbled in desperation, were not just a prediction. They were an epitaph of the American West. The Battle of Little Bighorn was more than Custer's last stand. It was the moment 2 worlds collided, and neither would ever be the same. Was this a battle of arrogance or destiny? Custer, the boy general who chased glory, versus Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull who fought for survival. The 7th Cavalry, hardened by war but starved by ambition, marched into a valley they would never leave. The Lakota and Cheyenne defending not just land, but the very soul of their people. The Army called it a massacre. The Lakota called it a victory. But the truth? Little Bighorn was both. For in that valley, the United States lost a battle, but the native nations would soon lose a war. The irony? Custer's death guaranteed their defeat. His legend fueled America's vengeance. The letter survived. The truth did not. Or did it?